The Night Riders continued to torment the communities of Kentucky. As raids continued, authorities started to try and tame the violence. Witnesses were called to testify against a previous raid in Princeton, Caldwell County. Mary Hollowell was in a situation many people found themselves. She had members of her own family involved in the Night Riders. So our story really begins before any raid took place in Princeton. Mary Hollowell's husband was a man named Robert Hollowell. He was a well-respected man in the community. He had a brother named John E. Hollowell, who was married to Lula Hollowell. He also had a cousin named John W. Hollowell. Both Robert's brother and cousin were involved in a tobacco association. One day, Lula Hollowell came to Mary's house and asked if she could borrow a mask that Mary and Robert's son had taken from a theatrical performing group. She said she wanted it to use it for a pattern. Mary obliged. Soon after the exchange, the raid of Princeton happened. Mary grew suspicious of her brother-in-law. John also became nervous about what his sister-in-law knew. He approached her and confessed that he participated in the raid, and that is what the mask was used for. He begged her not to mention any of it and threatened her not to talk. The real trouble began weeks after their talk. Robert and Mary's tobacco bed was scraped. They were devastated and did what they could to investigate. The first thing, they heard John's voice during the night of the scraping. They then followed footprints from the tobacco bed to John's house. It seemed John himself was to blame. A few nights later, John's tobacco bed was scraped and they blamed Mary. Events took a violent turn when the Night Riders became involved. Many witnesses were threatened for testifying against the Night Riders. Mary Hollowell had been called as a witness. She had been threatened. If she continued to testify, the Night Riders would kill her. She continued to talk and did not withhold any information. On May the 2nd, a few hours after midnight, the Night Riders visited the Hollowell farm again. Their numbers ranged from 25 to 30 men. Some of these men were unmasked, which was very uncharacteristic of the Night Riders. Robert Hollowell testified about the night. The first I hear of the approach of the mob was the shooting up of the house of tenants on my place. The mob drew near and I heard orders to close in around my house. My wife and I were ordered to come out. We stayed in the house until we heard someone say, "Bring the coal oil." Mary and her family were in the bedroom, and she decided to confront the Night Riders while they continued to shoot into the house. As she was making her way to the door, she was shot in the head. She didn't die. Some of the Night Riders were shooting birdshot, which inflicted very little damage to Mary, no more than a graze. While Mary had fallen to the ground, a ceasefire was ordered by one of the Night Riders. The Night Riders informed Mary again that they intended to shoot her. Robert continued, "When I went out, I saw George Brown, John E. Hollowell, and another man on the back porch. All three made us go into the yard. Brown shook his fist in my wife's face and told her she had been before one grand jury, but she never would have a chance to go before another. The association came here to win, and by God, it would win." The Night Riders told the Hollowells that they came unmasked because they wanted them to know who did it. George Brown told Robert, "You have worked against the association, but you must join in. We will give you 1 week to do it. If you tell who is here, we shall kill you." Robert was dragged away from the house and was beaten, whipped, and called a plant bed scraper. He was brought back to the house, and he heard someone shouting, "Jim, shoot her!" They did not shoot his wife. They did not want to do such a deed in front of the Hollowells' begging son. The Night Riders left, but Robert's brother, John, and some others returned. They demanded they leave the country. All of this happened in front of the Hollowell's son, Price, who also testified about how Uncle Johnny had came to their house. They beat his mama in front of him and he begged them not to shoot her. Uncle Johnny came and grabbed him by the hair. He told Price to stop screaming or he would cut his throat. Mary knew many of the people who were at the house that night. John W. Hollowell and Lula Hollowell, who said it was a sweet revenge to be here. It was also said that the night riders present told them they feared no judge or jury. The next morning, Mary and her husband rode to town to have the doctor remove the shot that penetrated her cheek and clean up her other wounds. The following weeks, Mary and her husband sold their farm and moved to Nebraska, but they would return. Mary's brother-in-law, John, decided to sue Mary over the tobacco bed scraping. The Hollowells moved back to Kentucky. Mary and Robert then sued a number of men involved in the raid on their farm. They sued for $100,000, $50 each, but the case ended in a hung jury. They sued again, and it went to federal court. In the end, Robert was awarded $35,000. The governor stepped in and pardoned Mary. They lived in Paducah, Kentucky. The lawsuit took place in 1908, 2 years after the Princeton raid. The night riders continued to threaten and attack those who sold to non-PPA members and those who wouldn't join the PPA. But with Mary Hallowell's stand, the beginning of the end of the night riders was at hand. More people began to stand up. More people began to push back. And within time, the night riders' power would wither. Don't forget to try out audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod to get a free book of your choosing. If you'd like to support the channel, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification button for more Kentucky history content. Find us on these social media platforms and check out the Kentucky History Podcast on these podcast platforms for more in-depth history of Kentucky. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.